Okay, all yours.
So I hope this all will work out well. I'm here to talk about data art, and I have to clarify that that's what I do, but also many other people do different things. Many people do data visualization, and today I want to convince you that data art is separate from data visualization, a completely different enterprise. Because in data visualization we try to solve a communication problem, and in data art we try to identify with the subject. And I want to talk about that. It sounds very strange, and so I want to talk about that a little bit more. And to that point, I'm going to show a few examples of data visualization, but also data art. So here's a classic example of data visualization made by Niemeyer in 1869. And it shows famously the trajectory of the failed expedition of Napoleon and his 440,000 troops to Moscow and back. And when he came back, only 10,000 people were still alive. So 430,000 people lost their lives in one winter as they were trying to conquer Moscow. It was a very bad idea. Unfortunately, this graph was available some 50 years after the expedition, so had people had a little bit more predictive software, they might have been able to avoid this disaster. However, that was not available at the time. To me, this is both art and it is also data visualization, because clearly it tells the story of a lot of data, but it's also really radical in how innovative it was in coming up with the form itself. And I think that Niemeyer deeply identified with the subject of the failed Napoleon expedition, because it actually was a critique. This was made in 1869. It was a critique of the Napoleonic regime. In 1869, we had Napoleon III who tried to do something very similar and went to attack Germany, and it led to another disaster. So there's many layers to this, both art and visualization, and definitely a lot of identification. So another work I want to show is by an amazing artist named Andrea Fraser, and she made this chart here. Now, for most data visualization experts, this would be a terrible chart because it's very noisy and confusing, but for her, it's a part of the territory. And you know that it's art when you see it in a museum as a stack of prints like this. And it talks about art itself, actually, and so she identifies with art as an artist, and she talks about how you're better off buying rare whiskey than art, because rare whiskey has a much better return on investment than art does. And it's stunning. So many layers of thought in this wonderful piece of art. But let's talk a little bit more about the topic at hand, identification. And I want to start with a piece of music that I find deeply moving. It's called, it's part of Felix Mendelssohn's composition, Midsummer Night's Dream, and it sounds something like this. These four chords open a wonderful composition, Midsummer Night's Dream, which is meant to be accompaniment to the famous play by Shakespeare. And Mendelssohn was 17 when he composed this. Most people did best work before age 25, so that's also something to consider. But what he did is he sat in his parents' garden, and he was thinking about this commission he had to make some music, and the summer breeze picked up. And in Berlin, there's the beautiful linden trees, and there's the warm weather, and he tried to sonify the summer breeze, but what he did was he didn't measure it like a weather report. Now, here's a Berlin Temple Love weather report of a summer breeze going by many years later, but he didn't measure it, he didn't think about it, he became the summer breeze. He identified with the summer breeze, and only once he could identify with the summer breeze could he make this music that to me still today sounds exactly like a summer breeze feels. It is not a representation, it is the thing itself transposed into music, and that's what artists do. Data visualization people, they want to represent things, but artists want to be the thing that they are talking about and that they're presenting. So identify with the subject. And let's see, can we go further here? There we go. Another artist at that time was Gustave Courbet, and he painted this phenomenal painting of a trout, and he wanted to show the trout itself. He wanted to be the trout. Why did he want to be the trout? The trout looks like it's dead on the shore of a river. There's blood coming out of its gills. Why did he want to be that trout? Well, because he himself was exiled, and he was exiled from France, and he had to go live in Switzerland, which doesn't sound that terrible to me, but it was not his home country, and he definitely missed France. He was exiled because of political reasons. He was a political prisoner for a while, and eventually he was kicked out of the country, and he was very sad about it, and so he felt like a trout that was out of the water. He couldn't breathe, and he was in foreign lands, and he was not in his element, not with his friends, not with his family. So seeing that trout in the river made him think of, made him identify, because he had that same situation in his life. And so that's how he made this painting. It is not a painting of a trout, it's a painting of an artist representing himself, and identifying 100% with the trout itself. So I do similar things, and I was recently asked to, invited to do a video for the Salesforce Tower. Maybe you've seen it. It was around in December, so every night in December you could see this animation go around and around the tower, and the first question for me was, how do I identify with the tower? Well, I can't, because I'm not as tall as the Salesforce building. My ego isn't quite big enough to fill a Salesforce building. However, the Salesforce building sits on top of a station that is the BART station, and in that BART station there is a number of people that come by every day. And this is the data of people getting on and off in Berkeley BART station. And it so happens that my wife goes to work almost every day with a BART train. And so she's on that station, and so with that piece of information I could identify with the trajectory of people, 400,000 people going in and out of the city every day to work. And that is an epic thing to think about. I could think about my wife and how busy she is packing her lunch and so forth, and rushing out the house to make the BART train, getting off, going to work, and then coming back home. And so that piece of data is something I could identify with, because I identify with her experience. And sometimes I even go there myself using that same tree. And so when I saw that data, I was like, okay, this is an entry point, and there's other entry points going crabbing and coming by the buoy. And so I collected a whole bunch of data about San Francisco and the Bay Area, and I used that to animate the graphics on top of the tower. So these are all really portraits of my life, and portraits of all our lives, and the joyful things that we experience as we come together every day to make this amazing thing called Silicon Valley and San Francisco Bay Area happen day over day, again and again. So this data somehow describes it and reflects it, but also we identify with it. We identify with these rhythms, and here's a video that shows the whole animation. The whole animation is 20 minutes long, so we took a year's worth of data, all public data, and put it on top of the tower, which of course is a monument to private data. And so it became a subversive project as well, because I'm very proud of public data and data we can get through government sites or through research sites. And so I wanted to celebrate the quality of public data on top of a tower that is really dedicated to private data. The video looks a little grainy here, but it was really amazing, and you can see that to see it on the tower and see it in the fog and see it shine through. These are people getting on and off BART. There's a whole key to various shapes and what they mean. There's seasonal changes. There's buoys that measure the swell of water in the Bay Area. There's also solar flares that come. These purple hats are solar flares that come into the Bay Area, and it's all synchronized. But it's not a data visualization in the traditional sense. There's no X and Y, and you'd have to read something about it before you would understand what it is. But you can, because you can, read about what it is in a newspaper, and then you can. Here's a spare the air day coming by. Do you see that? Oh, it looks like a big gray thing covering everything, and that's what it looks like sometimes. And so that's how I made that work. And so it really was about becoming the Bay Area for a year, and the rhythm of the Bay Area, and identifying with that and presenting that. So that was a lot of fun. I was very happy to do that. How are we doing on time?
Plenty of time.
Okay, good. So now I'm going to switch a little bit and talk about data visualization. I just finished about half an hour ago. I was talking to my students who are taking an online course, and there's actually both the data visualization and an artwork, I think. And first thing I want to point out is that it's a collaboration between me and 7 of my other students, 6 of my other students. And so what we did is I asked the students to write a text that had 100 words exactly, and it had to have the word "because" in it. Why? Because I'm very concerned about correlation ruling out over causation in artificial intelligence. In artificial intelligence, we often see correlation type reasoning dominating over causation type reasoning. And that's because correlations are much easier to compute than causations. And so I wanted them to explore what a story was like, because a story is about a transformation that happens for a reason. That's the fundamental aspect of what a narrative is. And so every narrative somewhere has a because. Something happened because something else happened. That's how people transform. Things happen to them and they change. And so one student wrote this amazing story. She searched deep through his irises for meaning and found meaning smiling back at her. Actually, it's really a story about a woman. Is there a lady who would like to read this text? Because I say she, but I sound like a he. Anybody want to read this text? Yes, you want to do it?
Sure.
Thank you so much. What's your name?
Bonnie.
Bonnie. Okay, please read this text for us. And imagine that you're that person. Identify with the subject of somebody who just graduated from high school. And let's take it from
Loud.
Okay.
Oh, wait,
I'm
going to give you my microphone, yeah?
Okay.
There we go. Thank you, Bonnie, for doing this. We'll have to share it a few later.
She searched deep through his irises for meaning and found meaning smiling back at her. She blinked, and they were suddenly hugging in flowing maroon caps and gowns. A long summer of sand, fresh water, sunburns, and bike rides later, they bid goodbye. She blinked once more and found herself months ahead, heartbroken, mourning even because the man she once knew, who understood the world in the same language she did, was lost to war. A lesson in true loneliness clung to her and became her best companion, for she didn't lie. She taught herself to walk all on her own.
Beautiful, thank you. So, can you identify with that story? Can you identify with being young and discovering the world, and then somebody you trusted with in your discovery of the world together disappears and becomes a different person? In this case, the soldiers he's speaking about didn't die, he just became a soldier, and his worldview changed entirely, and she lost the thing they had in common. And so it's a beautiful story, and it was beautifully read. Well, so 6 other people wrote stories, actually 30 other people wrote stories, and Ryan and Cheta decided to sonify it, and I decided to make a video of it. So we're looking at just an object of data, 30 stories, 100 words, and the word "because" is in there somewhere. And here we selected 6 of them. And how can we present all this all at once? Let's see.
There comes a point where one has to confront how much
She
of
searched
their
deep
life
through
is there.
his irises for
Pressing
meaning
countless
and
people
found
regret
meaning
decisions
smiling
they
back
made
at
in
her.
their lives.
She blinked and there were
Regret
suddenly
about
hugging
dreams, disillusion,
the
squid
flowing
about
maroon
every
upside
how much
down,
they took
boy
on,
dream,
half
happening out,
he was
a long
life
summer
track.
in
And
sand,
Peter
fresh
didn't watch
water,
this
Sunday
happen.
last year, I went to last
How
year,
much of it
and
is
shadow possibly
in
tonight, I'm not
so
why Vegas refused to all because the man she wanted. We got to the morning of it, so I walked up to after that, we got dressed up and started. Once we reached security, Jennifer gave us 2 numbers and told us to borrow our phone. Apparently, Bruno Mars wanted it to be a phone-free car. Because of this, I don't have any photos or videos, but still, that night will never be forgotten.
Wasn't that beautiful, the "because" moment, where all the words were lined up? So that's what the musician Ryan Ancheta did, and then I just put the visualization to it, and that was really, really fun.
There comes a point where one...
So let's see here, go on to the next one. To make this work, we made a word map, and we used AI to do those kinds of things, and we also colored the words, so each word has a color, but also has a shape and size, depending on how long the word was spoken and how loudly it was spoken. And when I looked at the text, I found out something very interesting because I used Whisper, an OpenAI tool that generates analysis of spoken words. I noticed that there was a piece of silence that were added to the recording. And this is the same story that you just read, Bonnie, except there was silence at the end of the recording, and OpenAI decided to generate a sentence of its own because it interpreted the silence as a different kind of story. And I thought, as a data visualizer, I would discard this data because it's noise, it's an error, right? It's clearly not meant to be there. But as an artist, I was like, wait a minute, this is amazing. The AI interpreted silence as a continuation of the story that was unspoken. And so we have a new version of the story that ends with the sentence, she was the only one who knew the world in the same language she had lost to a war. Which is a compelling sentence. It's a summary of the whole story, and it's completely artificial. And so I asked Kia if she was willing to accept that as an addition, and she said yes. It works very well. And so the interesting thing here is that we can think about the language that is lost as the human language. And in many cases, I find that I'm myself experiencing processes of dehumanization, and I find myself lost in a world of data and numbers and quantifications, and I want to resist that, and I want to say, let's move away from that. Let's try and hold on to what makes us human. Instead of allowing technology to dehumanize us, let's humanize ourselves. Let's look for ways in which we can humanize ourselves again. So perhaps we can find in Mendelssohn's four-chord tone poem a first taste of quantum superposition, because he's playing two kinds of things at once. He's playing both the dream and the reality. The dream of Midsummer Night's Dream and the reality of just being in a city in Berlin. Remember we talked about the city in Berlin, the garden in Berlin earlier? So it offers an experience of ambiguity, essential ambiguity, which would only resolve if we were to measure it. But instead, we experience it directly. Every time we listen, we can hold the experience in its quantum superposition, like the atoms of a summer breeze, and thematically, like love itself. Midsummer Night's Dream is about love, so it's the story about the language. With this experience often comes the jarring sensation of being alive, and perhaps even feeling that our lives do have a purpose. They do have a purpose. To be in superposition, to identify, to not become one or the other, but to identify with the state of just experiencing things, to resist quantization, and to experience beyond measure. And with that, we're going to listen to those chords again. Be 0 or 1, we can be both at the same time, and that's fundamentally human. And with that, I hope I convinced you that identifying with your subject is a special thing that we do as data artists. Thank you very much.
Question.